We come on the air this Friday with breaking news and exclusive reporting on Senate Democrats' secret plan to confirm Kamala Harris's cabinet. In the case that Democrats lose the majority in the Senate, the plan would call for the Biden cabinet to resign, and President Biden would then appoint Harris's team before the Senate term is over. In other words, use a lame duck Senate to confirm President Harris's cabinet, even though Democrats would have lost the election for the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer would confirm the new cabinet before the Republican-controlled Senate gets sworn in early next year. The move would completely circumvent the duly elected Republican Congress's ability to advise and consent, as the Constitution says, on Harris's cabinet. Schumer's office gave us a non-denial denial when we asked about it. We have a lot more on this and how Republicans plan to stop it in a minute with George Will. First, though, out to the campaign trail and get used to this split screen for the next 11 days. Beyonce joins Kamala Harris in Texas tonight. Our Kelly Meyer inside there reports that it is absolute chaos with people and folks getting in. Quote, it is just so unorganized. Perhaps organized by the same people who had the Michigan rally on the Michigan State game day. Kamala Harris cannot win Texas, but she wants young women to post on social media about Beyonce and abortion. Team Harris sent former President Obama to the swing state of North Carolina to try and juice African-American turnout. Donald Trump en route to the cherry capital of the world. You see the flags flying there. Traverse City, Michigan, way up north. They've been lining up since early morning to see him. At least they have a nice day. We're told it is 55 degrees there. It does get chilly this time of year. Welcome to the Ferris Network on television. First tonight, in politics and just about anything else in life, when you are talking about Nazis, you are losing. Democrats are talking a lot about Nazis and Hitler these days. And 11 days to go, they could be in real trouble. This could be a sign of it. Axios reports Democrats fear they are blowing it. The latest New York Times poll before the election shows Trump and Harris are now tied. And then there is this from CNN.
The fact that Donald Trump has a legitimate shot of winning the popular vote is something I think a lot of folks, including in my line of work, really didn't think could possibly happen when Donald Trump was running last time around. He could make history, not just for Donald Trump, for a Republican candidate as well.
He points out only once since 1988 have Republicans won the popular vote. We don't know if the Democratic freakout is warranted. It depends on if the polls are undercounting Trump voters like they did in 2016 and 2020. If the polls are right, this is a jump ball. But right now, Democrats fear they are losing so much that Hillary Clinton went on CNN to say that those voting for Trump, or at least those attending his Madison Square Garden rally this week, are Nazis or Nazi sympathizers.
One other thing that you'll see next week, Caitlin, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I write about this in my book. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany.
So Nazi, just so we all understand, is the new word for deplorable. They're the same kind of people who cling to their guns and religion. Hillary Clinton calling all Trump supporters Nazis is the mirror image of Tucker Carlson's speech a few days ago. Republicans think they're ahead. They are awfully excited and feel pretty good. So Carlson felt free to introduce Trump as an angry dad who will come home and give a misbehaving young girl a vigorous spanking.
There has to be a point at which dad comes home and he's pissed. And when dad gets home, you know what he says? You've been a bad girl. You've been a bad little girl and you're getting a vigorous spanking.
Carlson seemed to either A, understand that a little too well or enjoy it a little too much. Yesterday, we called Carlson the captain of Team Silly, making Hillary Rodham Clinton now the captain of Team Freakout. With us now, Chris Cillizza, journalist and senior advisor at the DGA Group. Welcome back to the program, my friend. It's good to see you.
I mean, things always get a little wild towards the end, Leland.
We only have 11 days. Are Democrats right to be scared?
Yes, right, because, look, I think the important thing, and you make this point a lot, and I try to make it a lot too, is if someone is being honest with you, the answer is we don't know who's going to win. It's the closest election we've seen in modern history. Fact. In the swing states.
The polls are the closest.
The polls are the closest. Correct. Okay, the polls are. But trend lines matter in politics and in life. If you're kind of trending up, good. If you're kind of trending down, bad. 11 days out, you want to be, even if the line's moving just a little bit up and to the right, you want to be that line, not the line that's steady or moving a little bit down. And I think Donald Trump is the line moving up and to the right just a little bit right now. Does that mean he's going to win? No. Anyone who says guaranteeing you that is not, they're not being honest with you.
No, look, there's the polls that are tied, then there is the prediction markets, the betting markets that say it's 60-40.
Yep.
That for all of us sports fans is basically a 3-point spread in a football game.
Correct. The old thing that they used to give the home team, the default 3 points.
So
yeah.
This is razor thin as you get. But what's interesting to me is then the response from Democrats, which is not to reach across the aisle and moderate. It is to say, if you vote for Donald Trump, you're a Nazi. And here's John Meacham talking about that.
The American people are on trial. And if we choose, if a sufficient number of us in a sufficient number of states choose to ignore the evidence that, as the Bible says, those with eyes to see and ears to hear can detect, then there's we have no excuse.
Okay, so we went from clings to guns and religion, deplorables, now Nazis. Is there any evidence that telling people, vote for me or you're a Nazi, wins their support?
No, and I mean, look, the people who think Donald Trump is the American Führer are already voting for Kamala Harris and have been for months.
They're hanging out at the
right. To me, the thing that I think about over and over again is there's 5, 6, 7, maybe % of people are undecided. Who are those people? I mean, a lot of different people, but it's a lot of Republican women who do not like Donald Trump personally at all. But they're Republicans, probably voted for Nikki Haley in the primary, and they prefer his policies on things like economy and immigration. To me, why are we spending our time? It's baked in. If you think Donald Trump is Hitler, you're already voting for Kamala Harris. There's not new information about Donald Trump's character. 2/3 of the country do not approve of Donald Trump's character. He's going to get votes from those people.
Right.
What new are we? Wait a minute, Donald Trump's a bully and he lies a lot? I mean, of course he does. We know that about him,
he had a
people
TV show.
Still vote for him.
He had a TV show about him being a bully.
Right.
And it was a very popular one at that. Mark Halperin says it's going to all come down to Pennsylvania. Because if Harris wins Pennsylvania, so goes it. The poll out showing that if Kamala Harris today was in Pennsylvania with Tim Walz, she loses. But hypothetically, if she had picked Josh Shapiro, the Jewish governor of Pennsylvania, she would be winning. So, of course, the irony why she didn't pick Josh Shapiro, the Jewish governor. But Halperin did a focus group with undecided voters. Here's what one had to say.
I think part of the reason why I'm being pushed towards Trump so strongly is that I find that the Democrats and the left just keep going straight to Hitler all of the time with everything. And if it's not the left pushing Hitler, it's the right pushing Stalin. So it's like we're fighting World War II every single day.
This is what I think is an important distinction. You tell me if I'm being fair in making it. Yes, Donald Trump calls Kamala Harris a fascist. Yes, he calls her comrade Kamala, on and on. He does not call her supporters that. And certainly the rest of the right does not sit around and say, voting for Kamala Harris, you are a communist. Whereas, we just heard from Hillary Rodham Clinton, you go to one of Trump's rallies, you're a Nazi.
Yeah, I think that's broadly fair. I mean, I've read and listened to a lot of speeches. He'll say things like, these are very evil people, these are stupid people. He's mostly not talking about their supporters necessarily, though he has said things like, if you're Jewish and you don't vote for me, you're an idiot. So he sometimes does that.
Calling someone an idiot and calling them a Nazi is a little
true.
different.
Very true. Look, can I just one point on that?
Yep.
I don't understand the Nazi thing. Can't we put that away? Hitler led an organized campaign to kill 6 million Jews to wipe out an ethnicity and a religion. What that we have seen from Donald Trump, I think he is a liar. I think he lies all the time and with ease. I think he would be radically different version of democracy than we've ever seen before. And I think he is authoritarian friendly. Let's leave it at that. But I don't think he's Hitler. I think we lessen what happened when we keep bringing this up. And it drives me crazy.
It's a great point in War Notes today, and we didn't cut it, the soundbite, but there was an Auschwitz survivor that said exactly what you just said, and how it cheapens what happened, it minimizes it, it distracts from it, and it is a terrible, terrible thing to do to the memory of 6.5 million people. And the real threat of true dictators who come in, like Xi Jinping of China, and want to wholesale slaughter entire groups of people. Your newsletter, speaking of which I get up and read every morning.
Thank you, my friend.
Headlined the New York Times poll. 48-48. Yep. This is the best Donald Trump's ever done. This is their last poll before the election. What do you pull out of this?
So,
other than that national polls don't matter?
Right. Again, very good point. This is decided in 7 states. Here's what I take from it. It's 48-48. It does not take a genius to say the race is tied / very close. Here's what I'd say. I looked at a couple things in there that if I was Harris's campaign would worry me. One, Joe Biden's approval. 40% approval, 56% disapproval. If Kamala Harris loses, there's a lot of reasons if she loses, but one big one will be, and we've talked about this, that interview on The View in which she is asked by Sunny Hassan, this is friendly interviews are always the most dangerous because you're not on guard. She's asked, would you do anything different than Joe Biden did over the last 4 years? And she says, I can't think of a thing that would be different. Well, lo and behold, surprise, surprise. That's in Donald Trump's closing ad, because of course it is, because you cannot be a continuation of someone who 60% of the public does not approve of and does not want and does not agree with on immigration or the economy. So to me, that number jumped out at me a little bit. Let me give you a pro-Harris one. If I'm Harris, she's doing this event in Houston tonight about abortion. If I'm her, I talk about abortion when I get up in the morning and then at breakfast and then when I get my coffee throughout the day. And here's why. She's plus 15 over Trump on who is better able to handle that issue. Talk about the issues you were plus 15 on.
She's already doing that. I don't think she needed the advice.
That's probably true.
We'll see her tonight. She's evidently unveiling some new language about abortion tonight. 9:30 is the Beyonce concert in Texas. Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you, Leland.
Good to see you.
You too.
There is the race, of course, for the White House. There is also the race for the Senate, where Democrats are most likely going to lose their majority in the Senate. The Senate, of course, confirms the president's cabinet. If Harris wins, but Democrats lose, they have a secret plan to confirm Kamala Harris's cabinet. We'll show you when we come back. Welcome back. Live pictures of Houston, Texas, where Kamala Harris will join Beyonce for a free concert and rally. Harris might get elected president, but it might not matter much for getting things done, like her cabinet or Supreme Court justices. Right now, Democrats have a functional one-seat majority in the Senate. Unless things go phenomenally well for Democrats, Republicans will control the Senate. That means Republicans get a veto power over Harris's cabinet. Some Senate Democrats are making emergency plans, break glass kind of plans, for a Republican-controlled Senate. Two Democratic strategists exclusively tell NewsNation one option involves the current lame duck Senate confirming Harris's cabinet, even if Democrats lose the chamber. Here's how it would work. If all 51 Democratic senators agree, Harris would choose which Biden cabinet members stay and which go. The ones that go resign. Biden would then appoint Harris's chosen members in November or early December. The Democratic senators who got voted out in the election would then vote to confirm Harris's cabinet, 51-49. The plans, by definition, circumvent the authority of the new duly elected Senate to, as the Constitution says, advise and consent on the new president's cabinet. George Will's here, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, NewsNation senior political contributor. Good to see you, sir. Well, norms don't matter anymore, do they?
It would be odd for someone who ran for the presidency to protect us from Trump breaking norms would shatter so many norms in her first month as president-elect. There are a number of things wrong with this. First of all, the Republicans have always distinguished between nominees for cabinet positions and nominees for judges. Judges are different because they serve a term that extends beyond the term of the president who nominates them. And therefore, it is more fitting and more plausible to be more meticulous about opposing them. Most Republicans, not all, of course, there's some fire breathers and bomb throwers, but most Republican senators would believe that a president has a right to staff his or her administration as he chooses, unless there's someone with an egregious problem. Beyond that, remember Mitch McConnell, who played hardball over the Merrick Garland nomination, again a judge. Mitch McConnell, probably by the time this would come up, would not be leading the Republicans anymore. The leader would be one of the two Johns, John Thune of South Dakota, John Cornyn of Texas, in all probability. Neither of them is an extremist. And neither of them really wants to start their relationship with a Harris administration, if such there is, with a kind of scorched earth, wrecking ball kind of approach to public life. I don't think this is, I think whatever Democrats are thinking this up should put cold compresses on their fevered brows, because it's really not going to happen.
Or have a Friday evening martini. Per a Schumer spokesperson, when we called about this, this is what I thought was interesting. It was a non-denial denial. Senator Schumer is focused on winning a Democratic majority in the Senate that will work to confirm future President Kamala Harris's cabinet. Okay, good luck with that. Possible that Democrats keep control of the Senate. At least the polling right now says that is highly, highly unlikely. You brought up Mitch McConnell, who there is probably no one who could better maneuver and play hardball in the Senate than Mitch McConnell has done. Isn't this kind of just a way to say fair's fair and give it back to the Republicans?
Except it's not fair because it's not equivalent. Again, the distinction between cabinet officials who serve at the pleasure of the president and leave when he leaves. Mitch McConnell would not do this against cabinet members. It just wouldn't be done. Second, by the way, there's another problem here. Kamala Harris is going to have a lot of resumes to go through. When you're picking an attorney general, a secretary of defense, a secretary of state, and a secretary of the treasury, these are complicated decisions that have to be made. And to have to make them on the fly is to risk making some really serious mistakes with personnel. And we all know the axiom, personnel is policy. You don't want to do this with haste. Well,
perhaps if she loses, they will think about that very same axiom when it comes to picking Tim Walz. A lot of, shall we say, consternation at one of the newspapers, one of the hundreds of newspapers that carries your column, the Washington Post. The Washington Post will not be making an endorsement of a presidential candidate in this election, nor in any future presidential election. We are returning to our roots of not endorsing presidential candidates. And that didn't go over well in the newsroom of the Washington Post. Cowardice, says Vanity Fair. The staff is furious that Bezos nixed the endorsement, Rolling Stone. Washington Post resignations and cancellations begin. Fox News reports the Washington Post editor-at-large quits after the paper declines to endorse a presidential candidate. I'm wondering if this is not good business by Mr. Bezos, because it gets out the rank partisans, which I think we can agree, populate the Washington Post, perhaps even are the majority there, without giving them severance packages.
Restiveness among the people in the Washington Post newsroom is not, shall we say, news. And it is not a secret to anyone who reads the news columns of the Washington Post and the headlines in the Washington Post that the newsroom is not a nest of Trump voters, to put it mildly. That said, there is, it seems to me, good basic policy on the part of all newspapers to not endorse candidates as an institution, because they are supposed to be, and they're supposed to pretend to be, is somehow above the fray, and to be umpires and moderators in commenting on this. Third, how many voters out there are saying, gosh, I really don't know who to vote for. I'm going to wait for the Washington Post to tell me. The answer is probably 8, and I don't know where they are.
I was going to say they probably live around you in Chevy Chase, Maryland, the fancy parts of town that exist. Before you go, breaking news now, and we've been expecting this, Israel reportedly conducting airstrikes against Iran, 3 a.m. over there right now, 2:30 in the morning in Israel, 3:30 in Tehran. There are explosions reported all through Tehran. We know that the United States has pushed hard, President Biden has pushed hard for the Israelis to limit this response. We're 11 days out from the election. Is this an October surprise now that whoever's elected president is without question a wartime president?
It's not a surprise because the Israelis said they were going to do it. And Israel has this interesting policy of doing what it says when it comes to national security. It will be interesting to see what targets were hit. The Israeli intelligence is so good, there have to be certain buildings with certain people in those buildings that they're targeting. It would be surprising if they targeted the hardened nuclear weapons facilities that the Iranians have, but we'll have to wait and see. But basically, not an October surprise because not surprising.
Hitting the oil facilities, I think, would be a surprise, which we know Southern President Biden has asked them not to do. Mr. Will, we appreciate it. Good to see you on a Friday, sir. We'll let you start your weekend.
See you soon.
Yes, sir. We are moments away from former President Trump speaking in Michigan. The campaign is spending big on an issue that doesn't appear to be a huge concern for voters, and it's working. What that is and what is working when we come back. Donald Trump is spending a huge amount of his TV ad money on an issue voters tell us isn't all that important. You might have seen some of the ads, especially if you watch college football.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
Hell no, I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to that.
Kamala supports transgender sex changes in jail with our money.
Kamala even supports letting biological men compete against our girls in their sports. Kamala is for they, them. President Trump is for you.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
If you look at Trump's spending, he is putting his campaign cash where his mouth is, literally. More on transgender issues, way more than anything else, more than double what he spends on immigration, his signature issue. And it's perplexing when you look at what voters say they care about most. 90% of Americans say the economy is a top issue for them, versus only 38% for transgender rights. The Bulwark had a lengthy piece on it. Mark Caputo writes, Trump goes all in on anti-trans. Is it the economy, stupid? Not for Donald Trump's presidential campaign. These days, its closing message on TV may as well be, it's the trans, you fools. And Mark is with us now. Is there a chance that boys and girls sports is a proxy for something else other than just boys and girls sports?
Yeah, there's really two ways to look at a campaign when it comes down to messaging. You're going to message on policy and you're going to message on values or character. And so economy, immigration, these are policy debates that tie in to various kind of character or values related issues. The transgender issue is sort of just wholly or almost completely a character-related issue. And the Trump campaign gambit is this, is that they needed to drag down Kamala Harris's favorability ratings and her top line in the ballot against Donald Trump by essentially telling voters, hey, this person believes things that you don't believe and that you think are, in the words of one of the ads, insane. And that is why they've just gone all in on this, which is to just drag down her favorite.
I wonder if they've also gone because it's been working, right? Because when this ad went on the air, it was in the beginning of college football season, right after the convention for Kamala Harris. And if you think about when her numbers started to go down and Donald Trump's numbers started to go up, it was about the same time. What do you make of they have this ad now in Spanish?
Yeah, they have the ad in Spanish. They've done 3 versions, and I'm told they're probably going to do more. If you think about public opinion concerning trans issues, it's essentially a triangle. And what I mean by a triangle is there's 3 edges where the public opinion starts to break against trans people. And that is natal males in women's sports, that is trans women in women's sports, subsidies for trans surgeries, and trans surgeries and puberty blockers for minors. When you look at the polling, those 3 issues are what the public, a majority or a plurality, are generally against. And Trump's campaign is going to probably be hitting each one of those, I'm told, in its subsequent messaging. You know, we got 11 days left, so stay tuned.
It's interesting that Kamala Harris was asked about this issue, specifically in her interview on Fox News. Take a listen.
Are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system.
I'm thinking that answer doesn't make anybody happy. It doesn't make the pro-trans rights group that boys must be allowed to play in girls' sports happy. And it doesn't make certainly sort of Team Normal that says 70% of America, 70, 80% of America that says no, boys shouldn't play in girls' sports happy. I'm wondering why is it, or what does the Harris campaign see in splitting the baby on this, for lack of a better term?
I think this is just the candidate deciding this is how she's going to answer the question, which is essentially avoiding answering the question. And that, to the Trump campaign, is what makes the ad and this issue so powerful. Is not only does the polling indicate that the public, the voting public, is on Trump's side on this and not on Kamala Harris's, she doesn't have a real answer for this. You see, on the economy, she can fight back and say, look, his tariff plan is a tax plan. On immigration, she can fight back and say, hey, he killed the immigration bill. He just wants to use this as a political football. There's no real response, as you just played there, for the trans matter, except for her to sort of say, well, Donald Trump did it too. That's not really true when it comes to the advocacy. And then the other issue about the ad that the Trump campaign says is very effective, and they study these things before they spend all this money, that is, they research it, is that this is Kamala Harris speaking in her own words. It's not a tear sheet from a newspaper headline that says she said something. This is her verbalizing, and that makes it very powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Mark, fascinating conversation, really excellent reporting, and you make a great point. Where people are spending their money tells you so much in these closing days and in the closing arguments. We appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. I'll see you.
Thank you. I have my phone here. It is set to silent, but every once in a while it will ring during the show or I'll get a text message. If it's the boss, I'll answer it. Actually, that happened a couple of minutes ago. You answer the boss. That's what happened to J.D. Vance at last night's NewsNation town hall.
We have a call right now from former President Donald John Trump. He wants to weigh in.
And I do have a question, and I think it'll be quite an interesting one. The answer should be easy. How brilliant is Donald J. Trump?
Take your time. Think about it.
All right, Greg Hartley's here, our body language expert, taught interrogation in the Army, author of the most dangerous business book you will ever read. Is J.D. Vance just yucking it up, or is it a little over-exaggerated? What'd you make of the knee slaps and the doubling over?
I think that is over the top. I think he's, of course, comfortable with this thing happening. He's kind of a joke. And, yeah, they're comfortable enough with each other. I think he's just relaxing, yucking it up a little bit. I think you're dead on. One of the good things about body language is there's no magic to this. This isn't like studying Arabic. What it is the body is trying to convey what it means. And as long as that matches what the mouth is saying, it's pretty fluid. That's what you're seeing there, just movement.
He does seem very comfortable. And look, he's been comfortable on television for a long time. It's just a different him. There was a moment that caught our eye yesterday as he flew out. The press pool that travels with J.D. Vance, and there's one with Tim Walz as well, caught this moment as he was heading up to the campaign plane. His wife is there, you can see, and he's getting the dog out of the car. The dog jumps, knocks the coffee out of her hands. He goes for the dog and leaves it. Oh, now he's going back to help with the coffee. I wonder whether she did not seem that happy with him.
She was not happy. Look at her hands. That's helplessness and frustration. You can't miss that. We all can read that. Of course, he diffused the situation and went, oh, yeah, I better go back and I took away the stimulus. I better go back and fix the problem. Yeah, so we can all read that. And that's just her because she's doing it, right? Doing what she normally does.
Yeah, I think that can be read by any man who has a wife, a fiance, a significant other. Your expertise may not have been as needed in that one, sir. Last thing we'll play, Kamala Harris's town hall with Anderson Cooper. Take a listen.
Is there something you can point to in your life, political life, or in your life in the last 4 years that you think is a mistake that you have learned from?
I mean, I've made many mistakes, and they range from, if you've ever parented a child, you make lots of mistakes too. In my role as vice president, I mean, I've probably worked very hard at making sure that I am well versed on issues.
Okay, so her staff didn't prepare her for that, and then
you can tell. Yeah, so what you can see is, remember I said when your brain is telling the same story that your mouth is telling, your body punctuates. It just does. It normally punctuates what you're thinking. She's running on this whole thing of, I'm not Trump, I'm a stronger leader. So asking her an existential question, in effect, hey, what did you do wrong? Well, she's going to have a hard time with that one. If you really are not certain, watch your blink rate increase. That's stress. And watch her head shrink down into her body as she starts to talk. We call that turtling, and that's shrinking the target. So she's really uncomfortable with that. See her fingers curling and her thumb moving back to her hand.
Is this the turtling?
Lots of discomfort, not as much confidence.
This is the turtling?
Yes.
Shrinking.
Uncle Fester mode, right?
Now, I'm a rank amateur at this. You saw her look up and to the right. Does that mean anything, or is that just hocus pocus?
Well, great question, because what we do is we look for a baseline. And I think her baseline is pretty normally up left when she's doing a visual recall. I think when she's going into the right side of her head, if I recall her baseline, she's actually kind of creating and going on the fly. Well, how would I paraphrase? How would I go about this? But she's not going to say, hey, I really royally screwed this up, when her whole platform is Trump, Trump, Trump.
No, it's a great point. Greg, it's always fun to end Friday night with you. Thank you very much, my friend. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Live pictures of Traverse City, Michigan, awaiting Donald Trump. He filmed a long episode today with Joe Rogan. Rogan is the most popular podcaster. The bros love him. That's the screen at the rally there. Young male voters love Joe Rogan. Why that doesn't mean they will vote for Donald Trump when we come back. In Texas with Kamala Harris, that's to focus on young women. Donald Trump today sat down with podcaster Joe Rogan to talk about young men, or to talk to young men. For those of you not familiar with the pod, Rogan is wildly popular in bro culture, also known as young men. Rogan's listeners, 81% male, 56% 18 to 34-year-olds with 17 million subscribers. And Trump's doing quite well with young males, especially young white males, as it were. Rob Smith reaches only a slightly, and we just mean slightly, smaller audience than Joe Rogan does with his podcast, Can't Cancel Me. Rob, good to see you. Donald Trump's team is just giddy over this young male vote. Are they going to learn that that Twitter and owning the libs isn't real life?
Well, look, I think that the strategy that they're doing right now, where they're going to a lot of different young male podcasts, is actually pretty brilliant. Look, he's doing Joe Rogan today. You've seen J.D. Vance on the show. I think J.D. Vance did Theo Von's podcast. Trump did Milk Boys. So what they're really doing is they're going to where these young men are right now. And look, I think you're right. You know, Twitter isn't real life and owning the libs isn't real life. But I think the difference with the Joe Rogan podcast is like, look, Joe Rogan's not a gotcha guy. Joe Rogan is, honestly, to tell you the truth, he wasn't even somebody that was particularly interested in having Trump on until recently. I think it's going to be a conversation. And what I think is that Trump thrives in these sort of longer format conversational pieces where people are able to kind of humanize him in a way that I guess the majority of the mainstream media seeks to dehumanize him.
And you think about a 3-hour podcast, and that is an awfully long time to sit there and talk with anybody. You think about a round of golf is 4 hours, 3 hours of just talking is a lot. We've done a lot about young men in this young male culture who feel sort of disenfranchised by Democrats, demonized, if you will, in some ways. Alex Keeney was on the program last night. He's from Politico, did a big piece about how young men are just, quote, fed up with it. Take a listen.
Yeah.
Just from the headline, they're just over it. What's it?
Well, that's a quote from Richard Reeves, who's been studying young men for quite a while and commenting on the politics that we're in right now. And it, in his words and the words of the young men that I met at Flagstock, is feeling a bit excluded from culture, feeling a bit forgotten. I think the feeling is just kind of being ignored. And here is, Donald Trump, who's marketing very aggressively to them. And no one else, seems to be selling to them quite the way he has been.
Rob, we got to get back to the breaking news out of Israel and Iran, but I want a quick answer from you if we can. Are these young men going to vote?
I think that there's a lot of people that are doing a lot of work on the ground to make sure that these young men do vote. But I have to make sure that we don't kind of stereotype this young man. I think that a lot of people want to stereotype the sort of like disenfranchised young male sort of like Trump-leaning voter as sort of disenfranchised in the incel culture and all that stuff. I have a young male audience. I'm a social first guy with the podcasting and the YouTubing and all that stuff. And a lot of these young men that are leaning towards Trump, that are leaning towards Republicans, like these are younger finance bros. These are younger sports, gym bros, MMA bros. So let's not make the mistake that we're kind of stereotyping every single young man that leans conservative or that is leaning towards Trump as some sort of, loser disenfranchised by Democrats. I think that they're a little bit more diverse than that.
Well, look, the MMA bros and frat bros have been disenfranchised by Democrats.
That is true.
The DNC website doesn't even talk about them.
That is true.
Rob, thank you very much. We got to get to Israel and Iran. We will talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right. Live pictures right now of northern Israel. Will Iran retaliate? Still have a few hours to do it when we come back. Back now with breaking news. Live pictures of northern Israel. About 3 a.m. there. Israeli F-15s, F-16s, F-35s would just be making the return flight now. From Tehran and Iran, where they bombed a number of military targets there. With us now, Ambassador Kurt Volker, former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, distinguished fellow at CEPA. It's good to see you, Ambassador. Thank you. At least so far, it appears as though these are pretty limited. Does that mean Iran calls it a month, as it were, and licks its wounds?
I doubt it. I think the Iranian rhetoric has been pretty strong as well, commenting on the assassination of these leaders of Hezbollah. And so I think they're going to see what the Israeli strikes are. We don't really know much about what the targets are the Israelis are hitting yet. We'll learn more about that tomorrow, I'm sure. But then I think Iran will want to choose a time and place to respond again.
There was enormous pressure by President Biden and his national security team on Israel to limit its response. There was the leaks of the U.S. intelligence assessments about what Israel's response was going to be. Does that prolong things, or does that at some point achieve this magical de-escalation or non-escalation that the administration's desired for the past 13 months?
Yeah, well, my personal view, Leland, is that is the wrong signaling here. It encourages Iran Because if they know that we want to de-escalate, we know that they know we are trying to hold Israel back, they have no inhibitions as a result. So they unleash their proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and feel that they can do so with impunity. It also tells Israel that we are not behind them. And that makes them want to strike out more on their own and be more assertive than they otherwise might, because they feel they have to reestablish deterrence on their own. So I think it actually produces the opposite of the intended result.
That is such a misunderstood point in Washington and around the world that you just made. It's that Israel is more restrained when they feel that the United States has their back. When they feel alone in the Middle East, they have to go out and establish deterrence on their own. As you look at the bomb damage assessment reports, the Iranians will lie about what was hit. The Israelis tend to be pretty quiet about this stuff. What will you be looking for in terms of whether Israel accomplished its mission?
Well, I think the most important thing that we should be looking out for is whether this is now something that takes place repeatedly, or is it a one-off? If it is a one-off, if Israel hits some military targets that they wanted to hit and they feel that it worked and made a difference, this may actually start to taper down. Iran's response may be lower as well. But if this is something where Israel took shots tonight, they do the battle damage assessment tomorrow, they try again tomorrow night, they do another assessment, they try again, this could actually be the beginning of a much larger phase of the war.
Yeah, you think about this 11 days before the election. Does Tehran put the U.S. politics and the election into its calculus in terms of a response?
Well, I think so, because I think both of them are looking, both Iran and Israel are looking at the U.S. elections, and they're probably figuring if President Trump is reelected, he will have a much tougher policy on Iran. He will certainly be willing to strike Iran from the from U.S. forces directly in order to impose some deterrence on Iran. That means Iran will probably try to get away with whatever it can get away with now before a new inauguration, if it's President Trump. And Israel also may be wanting to set the table as best it can before a Trump inauguration, when the pattern will change.
Yeah. Ambassador, thank you. We appreciate your time on this Friday night. Now 11 days until the election. Ambassador Kurt Volker, thank you. So much will change between now and Monday. NewsNation will be covering it all from out on the campaign trail. I'll see you Monday. Here's Chris.